Welcome back to this week's Pascal's China Lens. Now, last week we talked about the electrical vehicles and how China was starting to lead this industry. This was episode 40. If you haven't watched it yet, I suggest you do so because this is part 2 now. And part 2 is going to talk about how these electrical vehicle companies in China are actually differentiating themselves with Western competitors and what that means for Western markets, North America and Europe. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so now. I'm going to have a lot more videos, not on electrical vehicles, but a lot of other things in innovation and China. Now, if we look at just the last quarter, Q1, who sold most cars? Well, Tesla did very well with about 14%, and there's other companies that are doing quite well as well, but the winner seems to be a company that is SGMW. Who is SGMW? Never heard about it. Well, this is SAIC, Shanghai Automotive Industry, with GM, and they are together building a car which we've never heard about in the West, which is a small car which is only $4,500 US. And this makes total sense because a lot of people in the countryside or the smaller cities, when I talk about smaller cities, we're talking about 100,000 or 200,000 people, so not that small, but also in the urban areas, the tier 1, tier 2 cities, this is a very practical car, specifically because it has a range of 170 kilometers. So this is not as good as the 300 kilometers of the mid-end and the high-end cars, but it can do what needs to be done. And so this little car, which is a joint venture between GM, who has about 44%, and then SAIC, who has more than 50%, is really taking off in China. So this is changing the mentality. When people who have less money start buying these EVs, we can really see the change. And today, in the last quarter, there was already 10% of all the cars sold in China were EVs, compared to 4% in the rest of the world. And if you look at Shanghai, they aim to have 50% of all the cars being EVs in 2025. The whole country, it's about 20% that they aim for. So this is a real disruption happening. There's a window of about 4 years that China has to take on the world and make everything electrical. Now, the other reason that Chinese are going into electrical is because the price of license plates, for example, in Shanghai. And there's a lot of restricted areas. So China has been telling, or the government has been telling people, you can't drive here, or you need to buy an expensive license plate. But if you buy an EV, then you get that license plate for free. And so imagine that little small car, which is $4,500, you can get the price of 3 cars for the price of 1 license plate in Shanghai. It's crazy, right? So what do you want? 1 license plate or 3 cars? So this is really changing mentality. And you see that even in a high-end car, you can get it at 1/3 of the price just by buying an EV. And this is what it's all about. It's about changing the mentality. Now, if we look at the second biggest car sale on the high-end and the middle-end area, we really see Tesla being the winner. I mean, they're a winner globally. But what we don't always know is that 29% of all the sales of the world of Tesla is happening in China. So that's 1 out of 3 cars that Tesla sells, they're actually selling in China. That's why they built this $2 billion factory, this gigafactory, and they're producing 500,000 cars every year for this market. The Chinese market of EVs for 2021 would be about 2 million cars. So Tesla has about 14, 15, 20% of that market share. It's quite a lot. But Tesla has a problem. I mean, they've been given the red carpet, they've been giving loans from the government, they've had everything they could from the government to create that new industry and fuel the other companies to innovate, just like Tesla. Tesla is the example for them. But what happened just last month, or 2 months ago, on March 21, is that suddenly the government was saying, there's a problem with the data. And this is a very interesting story, because this is the moment where all the companies, you remember, Ant Financial, Tencent, they're all getting like scrutinized by the government, and so is Tesla. And now the government is saying the data that you're using with your sensors and your cameras and everything is actually could pose a national security risk. Basically, that data should stay in China, because you're kind of spying on what's happening there with the cars. quite interesting proposal. And so what is Tesla going to do? Well, in March, they clearly said this data is going to stay with us. We're not going to give it to anyone. We're not going to share it because this is our property. It's actually the property of the car owner. And then suddenly something happened. Just at the car auto show, the auto show in Shanghai just 1 month ago, there was this woman that actually had an accident with the brakes of a Tesla. And she had an accident because she claims that the brakes didn't work, and because of that, there was a big accident and a big problem. And she wants Tesla to refund her. And so this was a big thing on social media in China. But the interesting thing is that actually Tesla looked at the data and said, no, she was driving too fast, she braked too late, or she braked a few times, but it's not really our fault, it's the fault of this consumer. Outrage on social media. She went to the auto show, stood on a Tesla, everybody was taking pictures, and she was saying, you have to compensate me. Interesting, because just 2 days later, Elon Musk, or Tesla, the CEO in China, he apologized and he said he's going to release that data. They're going to release that data to show what it is. And so it's not about me against them and who's right and who's wrong. Now it's about that data is accessible to the government or to the regulators. And this is what Tesla will have to do. Otherwise, they're going to lose 29% of their global market share. Very interesting things that are happening. This is kind of like the reverse Huawei treatment in the US that is now happening in China. And China's starting to say, you want to play in China? Have to play according to Chinese rules, just like Trump said about Huawei in the US and TikTok and all these examples. And this is creating a new environment. What's interesting is that today, when we think about cell phone manufacturers like Huawei, they were blocked in the US and they're blocked in Europe. They can't use Android on their phones or pre-install it. They have a lot of limitations. What that means is that now they are going into the car industry because they feel this is actually the future. Now, if you think about the Tesla example, it might not be so useful, but still, Huawei is investing, Xiaomi, the other cell phone manufacturer, the iPhone of China, is investing heavily in EVs. Also companies like Didi, the mobility company sharing the Uber of China, investing in cars, in EVs. Evergrande, a bottled water company, investing in EVs. Everybody, Foxconn, is investing, the manufacturer of the iPhone. Everybody's going into EVs. So what's changing is that the electrical vehicle market is now being driven by tech companies. And so it will be much more about mobility, about connectivity, than about electrical. Now, the other thing is that they're starting to think differently in China, different business models. And when you look at what NIO has done, they have actually back last year in August started what they call a battery as a service model. What that means is that from now on, you can just swap batteries if you buy a NIO. And in Beijing, it works very well. 60% of all the owners of NIO are already swapping batteries with the new system. It takes 3 minutes, you get a new battery. Very smart. Of course, you need an infrastructure, and in China, NIO is doing that. How about Europe? How about the rest of the world? Will we follow? Will we do something different? This will be the place where everybody's going to start to compete. Even Huawei now is now building a new car, imagine. And they're building a new car and they're patenting the swapping or the sharing of energy between two cars. So everybody's looking at a new model to actually satisfy the consumer that wants to go EV. Now, what we see today is that a lot of Chinese EV companies are all preparing or are already into the European market and other markets in the world. They're going global and they want to take on the world. And the reason is actually for 3 different reasons. The first one is the market. First of all, the Chinese market is getting extremely crowded with 500 car manufacturers. But on top of it, the European market is the biggest second market and becoming the #1 market in the world for EVs. So lots of opportunity. That's what Chinese want, opportunity. But the other reason, and the second one, is as important, and that is the competition. Chinese always love to go where their competitors are, because they believe that is where the market will be played out. And so a lot of European car manufacturers are going into that transformation with EVs, specifically now that Europe is making much more strict when it comes to using combustion engines. You see that these companies are really targeting the transformation fast. And so China wants to compete on the turf in Europe of the European car manufacturers. Now, the third reason is about branding. Imagine you're selling successfully in Europe, like companies like Xpeng has done in Norway, iWays in Israel and in Europe. You see companies like Polestar from Volvo or Geely, very successful. You're also seeing companies like NIO that is entering massively in Europe this year. They all want to be successful in Europe, and the reason is branding. They want to show to their customers in China that they're able to compete and outcompete the European car manufacturers, EV manufacturers, because that means that they have proven that they have a high quality car, a high quality product. And that helps them back in China with their own clients, their own customers, but also on a global level, anywhere they want to sell. And that is how they could take on the world. And so I believe that the move to going global will just accelerate in the next 4 years. Because I think the Chinese companies, EV companies, have about a 4-year window to actually outcompete the traditional car manufacturers of the West. Now, what I believe is going to happen is that the fight and the competition, the race for the EV globally will not be about EVs. It won't be about electrical, because batteries, you can just buy them specifically from China. It's very easy. You can easily buy them. The problem will be, it's going to be about connectivity. It's going to be about charging. Who can charge the fastest, or maybe the NIO model with battery as a service? And how much time do you spend on it? It's going to be about autonomous. It's going to be about sharing. And so this whole mobility thing in the EV world is about the add-ons. It's about making everything smarter. It's about smart mobility. And this is where I believe that China could really be at the forefront and pole position compared to any other car manufacturer. Because in all 4 of these areas, I feel China is starting to lead. And they will make cars a lot smarter, will save a lot more time with cars, because you can do things inside the car and charge very fast. It will be a lot more trusted or trustworthy, because autonomous will be driven in China first. The sharing industry with Didi is just an example, a blueprint for the world, and so cost will go down. And so combine all these things, and it's not about EVs anymore. This is really about mobility. And that is where I believe China could build the car of the future, the car that we would all envision, that actually creates the perfect environment, not just to go from point A to point B, but actually be part of our life and become a lifestyle product. And that's why I believe China could actually lead the EV industry globally. And if we want to understand what's happening in EV, we have to watch China. Now, the interesting thing about the EV market in China is that these hundreds of manufacturers of EVs in China, they don't want to be a Tesla killer. They don't want to kill Tesla. No, they want to kill the combustion engine, because that's the 90% of growth market. While in the West, you hear Jaguar, BMW, Volkswagen, they're all talking about creating this Tesla killer. And so the mentality is different. They want to provide a different experience with the EV rather than just a battery instead of a combustion engine. And so they're thinking much more holistic. And I think that is where consumers anywhere in the world could actually really start liking the EVs coming from China. And they look great already. So my next car could probably be a Chinese EV. I would really look forward to that. I hope you like this, and see you next week for another great episode on Pascal's China Lens.